Now we are testing two motorbikes again together, and we can easily say that this is not a real point to compare these two bikes, because they are not really the same category. I mean, the price and technical knowledge and everything is pretty much different, but anyhow they are really in one class. The new Yamaha Ténéré 700 and the KTM 790 Adventure R. They are relatively close in price. The knowledge is not the same, I know, but if in this moment I would have to change a motorbike from this segment, I would check both of them for sure. Although the price difference in Hungary, and we have to speak about the price difference in the case of these two motorbikes, is approximately 17–18% between the price, and of course the Ténéré is the cheaper bike. But this difference between the two bikes is absolutely put from the technical side to the KTM. So it's much better depending on your preferences, your personal preferences, because the engine characteristics, the seat position, the knowledge when riding off-road is all a little bit different, and it's depending on your personal preferences which is going to be your bike. So these differences are much more important than the price. That's why we have to check both of them. Let's speak a few words about the engines. The Yamaha has, as I already mentioned, a parallel twin 698 cubic centimeter parallel twin engine, and its maximum power output is 72 brake horsepower, and the torque is 68 Newton meters. So these numbers are really not high. But what is the strong point of the Ténéré's engine is that it's giving down the power absolutely smooth, and you can absolutely clearly calculate with it at all the time. So it's true that the KTM at the moment behind me is much stronger, for example, when coming out from a curve on asphalt, on a serpentine, but or a curvy road. But anyhow, you can calculate with the power of the T700 very well, and it's a much smoother motorbike. The KTM's engine is 100 cubic centimeters bigger. The construction is more or less the same, the basic construction, but the system is not the same, because this is a 270-degree engine, because as KTM wanted to make an engine which is working like a V2, because they had a lot of, and still have a lot of V2 engines, so they really wanted to make, although it's a parallel twin, they wanted to make a V2 sounding and feeling engine. The numbers are higher, so not only the cubic capacity, but the power is also much higher. It's 95 brake horsepower, and the maximum torque is 88 Newton meter. So really the KTM's engine is really much more rubbing, a much more dynamic engine. You can feel the power really better than in the case of the Ténéré, but you have to be able to use this engine power as well. Otherwise, for example, when riding off-road and you are a beginner, it can cause a much bigger surprise than, for example, the Ténéré's parallel twin. And the other thing is that this engine, as it is working like a V2, is not loving the extremely low RPM. So for example, if it drops down to 2000, then it really makes a big chain noise and everything, although the Ténéré in the same case it is not making the same. And the KTM's all working behavior is also pretty much different, because all the time you can feel that vibration and the engines working and everything else just in the same way as a V2. And it's again a question if you like that engine working or this engine working more, so it's going to be depend on you, not on the bikes. In the beginning of the review I already mentioned that the front thrust engines are pretty much similar, because both of them are upside down telescopic forks, but otherwise there are lots of differences between them. The Ténéré has got a 43 millimeter wide telescopic forks, and the KTM has 48, so that's a much thicker. And the travel in the case of the Yamaha is 210 millimeters, while there it's 220 millimeters. So from all the points, the knowledge of the KTM's front and also rear suspension is really better. But if you are just let's say making excursions after the paved roads, or just normally ride the unpaved roads and not riding real hard off-road, then the knowledge of the Yamaha is going to be enough as well. Although it has to be clear that from all the points the KTM is better, and it's really feelable that that's a stronger front suspension. What is also important that all the dimensions can be changed with a screwdriver in the case of both of the bikes. In the rear, both of the bikes have a central suspension unit. In the case of the Yamaha, the travel of it is 200 millimeters. In the KTM, it's also 240, so there the travel is also longer, and all the parameters can be changed. But in the case of the Ténéré, it can be changed without any kind of tool. So with your hand here you can screw it, the preload. All the other parameters, of course, with a screwdriver. And this is a negative point, that the KTM's preload also can be changed only with a tool. And if you, for example, your passenger is just jumping up behind you, then in the case of this bike, this is a big advantage. From the basic point, the brake systems are also the same. In the front, 2 brake discs, and in the rear, 1 brake disc, but all the other parameters are much better in the case of the KTM, we can say, because here we have 320 millimeter brake discs, 4-piston radial calipers, and even in the rear we have 2-piston caliper in the rear brake. And in the case of the Yamaha, the front discs are much smaller, 282 millimeters, and we only have 2-piston calipers, and even the brake tubes are not made from steel but from rubber, and in the rear we have only 1 piston. So all in all, the brake system of the KTM is we can say much better. But as we got these 2 bikes from their owners for trying them, it was really interesting that the KTM has a little bit, let's say, more off-road oriented tire than the Yamaha. And when we made emergency brakings on asphalt, then although the brake system is better in the case of the KTM, but it didn't turn to a shorter brake distance at all. Both of the bikes have the, let's say, nowadays fashionable rally looking, especially the Yamaha, because this is really looking like a Dakar motorbike, the plastics and everything, and the light and everything, and the whole bike is really a narrow thing, only when you are just watching it and when you are riding it as well. The KTM is, let's say, a little bit similar and also pretty much different. The upper part, when you are sitting, it's narrow, and the front part also, and it's also really looking like an adventure bike because of the lifted up mudguard. But KTM used this special fuel tank, which is positioned very down and is also pretty wide. So this part is absolutely different from the whole let's say philosophy of the Yamaha, because at the down part it's really wide, closely like a boxer engine of BMWs. If you sit up on the KTM, then the whole seat position is pretty close to a supermoto, because you are your knee angle is pretty sharp. You are sitting pretty close. This is the, let's say, natural position for your ass. You are sitting pretty close to the handlebar, and your hand position is just like if you are sitting on a supermoto. And the whole behavior of the bike when you are riding on curvy roads is always or also the same. The wind protection here has a pretty big problem, because although you can move the windshield, but it's very, very noisy in every position of it. So it's really a big noise that this normal standard equipment windscreen is making. Anyhow, if you get accustomed to it or you have a good earplug, then this bike is also absolutely good for even longer distances, especially as the seat is more comfortable on the KTM than on the Yamaha. So here the seat is a little bit harder, but the whole body position is much closer to, let's say, a touring position than that sporty one of the KTM, because the knee angle is more comfortable because of the footpeg position, and the handlebar is far away from you. So this is much closer to, let's say, a relaxed touring than the KTM's seat position. And although we have a smaller and pretty narrow wind protection in front of you, but this makes much less wind noise than the KTM. So for example, from this point I loved this bike much better. I mentioned already several times that they are pretty similar motorbikes from lots of points. For example, the wheel sizes are also the same. In the front, both bikes have 21 and in the rear 18 inch rims, which means that you can buy any kind of tire. So the hardest off-road tire which the Dakar motorbikes are using are also usable on them, and the, let's say, absolutely street focused tires are also available in these sizes, so you can use among any kind of circumstances both of the motorbikes. And the big question is that which one would I choose if I had to buy one of them from this segment? And it's really a hard question, because the price difference, but how much the KTM is more expensive. KTM gives for every euro cent lots of knowledge in its bike. Better suspension, better brakes, much better electrics and safety things, traction control, ABS, coordinated ABS, many using modes of the motorbike. Yamaha is a much more simpler motorbike. It has a one engine map. You can switch off the ABS. You have no traction control, so it's a much simpler motorbike, or more simple motorbike. But anyhow, after trying both of them, it's really funny that if I would buy a motorbike from these two, then I would change the Yamaha, because it's simpler, smoother. For me, it's a little bit more comfortable. So it's closer to my personality than the KTM, although that bike is also in the top of its class. If you like this review, please push a thumb up on it. In the description under the film you can find a link where you can donate our work. If you do it, then we send all of our films to you before they become public. If you haven't done it yet, please subscribe for our channel and watch our previous materials as well. Thanks a lot for your kind attention.